All right, what's up, everybody? Hope everyone's enjoying your Saturday so far. This is Harry Weston, aka Full Out from Versatile Dance Company, welcoming you to our new and improved Versatile Conversations. We're using YouTube Live and Facebook Live, trying to up our game on this internet life that we're all living. So excited to have everybody here with you. Would love to, have everybody, if you can, throw up some comments in the chat, just so I know, who's here and who we're rocking with. I know Arreola's here, Rosie's here, Breeze is here. So I love seeing that. If you want to, feel free at any time. Just let us know you're here in the chat, and we can just keep rocking. We're so excited to be having this conversation today. We are in part 2 of our Versatile conversation with Pierre, aka P-Boogie, the executive director and co-founder of the incredible nonprofit arts organization Great One-Aters, based out of the San Fernando Valley, specifically in Pacoima, California. So yeah, we're so excited to have him with us, and we're going to jump right in. We're going to kind of pick up where we left off last time we were talking with Pierre, and yeah, I think let's just go for it. Pierre, let's welcome you back in.
What up? How's it going, everyone?
Yes. Wow. Good. So good to have you back, brother. How you doing today? Everything good on your?
Igualmente, it's pretty good today. I can't complain. I cooked a little breakfast, had some fun with my mom in the morning. Had to connect, which is like an important part of what we got to be doing right now. Besides and beyond just the organizing work and everything, and making action happen out on the streets. We definitely have to make time to be able to connect with those that we love and those that we want around us,
Yeah, no, most definitely. Mom time is super important.
Yeah, man, definitely a blessing.
Human time, I definitely hear that. Well, cool. Let's jump right in. So again, for anybody signing in, this is Versatile Conversations, episode 6, part 2 with P-Boogie from the Great One-Aters. This is Harry Weston, aka Full Out from Versatile, welcoming y'all in. And yeah, just to give a quick, really brief recap. So last time we had Pierre on, we had an incredible conversation. We had so much fun. We wanted to bring him back, but basically, what we really got to have a window into last time was Pierre's story and his personal story as a Latino man growing up in San Fernando Valley, in the 90s, in the 2000s. And just kind of his story, as an artist, as a hip hop practitioner, as a man, as a human being. He got to share with us his childhood, the creation of the Great One-Aters, which are an incredible youth mentorship, nonprofit hip hop arts organization here in Los Angeles. Please go hit them up, go check them out. They have an incredible new center they just opened up in the Canoga Park area. I'm sure Pierre is gonna, bump all that for y'all today. But yeah, we really got to hear about his kind of personal history and a little bit of the history of the Great One-Aters, grounding them in the hip hop arts, in wrestling, in athletics, and the beginnings of all of that. We got to hear about his time at Brown University and what it was like to be a Latino man in a predominantly white, Ivy League college institution and what that was like. And then we got to dip our feet into the hip hop organization arts kind of conversation. And then, of course, with IG Live, we got cut, right when we got to that stuff. So we just felt like we had to bring it back because this is so much of Pierre's expertise, so much of what he does and what the Great One-Aters do and what Versatile does. And for those of you who don't know, Versatile and the Great One-Aters have been partners for a long time now. We do very similar work. We're brother-sister organizations. We collab on events, on programs. We've just been really deep in this partnership for a good couple of years now. So yeah, just so happy to have Pierre back. And yeah, man, I don't know if anything you just want to say to kind of just introduce yourself to everybody and just say what's up before we get into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up really well. It's really great. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a platform to share with you, and share with the world, really. I think that it's so important right now for us to change the narrative in our communities. And a big part of that is for us to be able to tell our stories. A lot of our cultures really come from oral tradition, and it's a very Western perspective to have, the written word really be the factual thing. And so that's why it's important to really have these types of conversations and communicate with one another as beings, so that we can really grow our own sense of what history is in our own communities and whatnot, and not be defined by the exterior type.
Yeah, starting us off with truth. Yep, that's 100% real. How do we recognize, right, the external differences and the the lines that have divided us, and then after recognition, how do we move past it, and how do we recognize the human beings underneath all that? No, I appreciate that. Well, cool. So let's jump in. So where we picked up last time, which I would love for us to kind of start in, is basically, as an executive director of the Great One-Eighters, your role is so important to the work that the Great One-Eighters do. And I think very often, especially in dance culture and in the dance community, we see kind of the outward facing folks. We see Devious, we see Rock Swift, the dancers, the DJs, the folks who are like in the community, in the cypher, kind of out there participating. But a lot of times what we don't see in these organizations are the administrators, right? We don't necessarily see the board of directors. We don't see the executive directors, the administrative assistants, the development people, the fundraising folks, the folks kind of running these programs, and I think that's super true for VersaStyle too. Folks I don't think really ever understand the work that goes behind running these organizations, and running a nonprofit, and the politics behind it, the struggles behind it, the beauty behind it, the camaraderie, the family behind it. So I think I'd love, if we could just start by kind of, could you just share with everybody what your role is with the Great One-Eighters and how that's developed, what your responsibilities are, and maybe some of the importance and value you see in your role, and also just in the role of administrators in general in these arts organizations.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the question. I appreciate us starting off at this point, because I've been doing a lot of my own personal digging and soul searching to really find meaning in this title and in the places of leadership that I find myself in. And it's not because the work isn't purposeful, but a lot of the times it's because in the work we're just so onto the next one that at times we don't give ourselves the times to reflect, to still light that fire within us, to recognize that, at this point in time in our being, we're not infinite, we're finite. And so to not recognize that and be part of a nonprofit, to not recognize that and be part of an arts org, grassroots org, like how we started, and that's trying to make it, I think it's a disservice in that sense if you're not really considering your own self. And so for me, my sense of leadership, I think, has been able to grow and develop because of the Great One-Eighters movement from the very beginning. When we first started it as a grassroots organization and collective, more than anything, it was all about, communal leadership and collective leadership. We were all leaders in our own rights, whether some of us knew what's up with like bureaucracy, like myself, or others knew what's up more with, let's say the musical and DJing aspect, or others knew more about the media and photography aspect. We would all shine and we would all try to find our niche to help one another. So I think that was a very humbling experience in the beginning. And while it was really interesting because from the gate, it was like, folks kind of looked to me as like, okay, so what's next? How are we structuring this? How are we moving this along? It wasn't like I was the one creating all of the ideas and everything, because it was a collective process as well. And, Rock Swift and Devious had an immense part in all that. But from the gate, it was interesting. Like, we just kind of like, because we knew of one another in that crew sense, because we kicked it and we talked and we vibed and we ciphered with one another. It was like unspoken, of like, okay, we know you're good at this, we know you're good at that, we know you're good here, and we would all just kind of uplift those strengths in us. And that was extremely helpful. And for me, it was extremely daunting because it was like, oh, okay, you're going to be the one to coordinate things, by the way, and it's like, oh, how am I going to coordinate all these like super alpha male, like, chill dudes who I don't want to tell what to do because, I'm barely like, I barely knew what's up with hip hop at that point. Like, they were putting me on. So it was like, how am I to lead when I don't even know what being a leader period / being a leader in this space is, because I didn't really grow up as much as I was a good kid in school. I never really grew up being told like, oh, you're a leader, you're going to be a leader. I was always more of a loner, honestly, growing up. And I had my friends sprinkled here and there, but it was mostly myself, as I had mentioned in the previous time we had talked. And so that was a really interesting experience for me to be put on in that way and to be trusted. And that's something that I realized, like the best way for me to lead was to be vulnerable and to trust others, and to really, because I didn't trust myself, it was to believe in my team. Like, because I was like, I didn't know right from wrong, up from down. I was kind of like, tripping and stumbling and trying to keep moving forward. And it was because I believed in my team, and I believe in my team, that we've been able to overcome so much. And I think it's some of the darkest points, I don't want to call them dark, but light and dark, but some of the darkest points in I think the last decade of me organizing through hip hop culture, being with the Great One-Eighters and everything. Some of our darkest moments, or my darkest moments, speaking for myself, is when I not only had faltered in my belief of self, but also in my belief of other people in the crew, and that's when I realized, I think that's been a major turn for me, because, it was like we were building things up from a grassroots level to a more formalized level, and then you have more bureaucracy, and then that bureaucracy starts to kind of take form and place. And I need to take it there. It's because of our colonized perspective of, oh, this is, if we're really trying to get to the next level, this is the only way to get to the next level. And then that, as a leader, for me, what I did was I focused so much on rules and focused so much on the limitations and restrictions, because that's what's like thrown at you to like kind of keep you from excelling in this system. I focused so much on that I stopped focusing on people. And that was something that was very integral to our very beginnings. And obviously we've been able to continue to grow and overcome, those humps. But I say that because I think we need to be more honest about our experiences in leadership. When we meet the mark, great, let's celebrate those things, but let's talk about when we don't, because that's the only way that we're truly going to be able to heal. If I make you think that, the Great One-Eighters are always great every single day, 100% of the time, no doubt it, that's why it's in our name, what kind of service am I doing to you? I'm feeding you the same BS that they fed us in our public education schools. The story and the narrative that the Black and brown man was that is a civil rights hero was perfect and without a flaw. The MLKs and the Cesar Chavez's of our world. But the reality, as great of men as they are, they were imperfect. They did things, they said things that this day would be problematic, or would be not problematic per se, but be more radical in not perfect in the westernized, colonized sense. So I think if we're spoon feeding ourselves this idea of perfection and not talking about the moments when it gets rough, and not talking about the moments when MLK was like, it's not just only about thinking about nonviolence. We have to address all these other things. It's not like we're living in a bubble here. Those types of difficult conversations are what we need to be having now. And that's why I appreciate these types of forums and that this is occurring now, because I feel like across sectors, things are getting a lot more real, and conversations are taking place that are a lot more grounded in reality.
Yeah. Damn. Starting us off strong, Pierre. My goodness. Okay. Wow. Thank you for bringing in the vulnerability piece. That's just huge. And I know, and it's amazing because you did such a great job of that in our last conversation too, with your personal story. But then just bringing us back to that in terms of, from a leadership perspective, how to be vulnerable and how to be okay with this quote unquote failure. I think we have this stigma, in our society that failure is not okay, and that it's like something to be avoided and not talked about and swept under the rug. And so for you to bring that up as a leader, I just think is powerful for anybody who has any aspirations to be a leader out there, to know that it's okay to like stumble and trip up and not maybe know what you're doing all the time. That's a beautiful part of leadership and growth. And you're right, we are not taught that in our education. We're not taught that in public school. That kind of that gray area, like you said, you know, where it's like, you know, you're figuring it out. It's just not talked about. So thank you for bringing that in as a leader, as a man, for all the men out there. Again, just Pierre is telling y'all that shit's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to just be you, and that's beautiful. And then as a leader too, like, just, man, relying on your team. No one does it alone. That these, you know, I think again, we are built on this structure of this hierarchy of like a leader and then everybody else below, you know, the person with the knowledge and everybody else is, you know, getting knowledge from that source. And it's just not realistic, and it's not healthy for any community, right? Mm. And so how do we as organizations, you know, deconstruct that? And especially in the nonprofit world, like nonprofits are built as businesses, and we so not conducive to how we all want to do this art. We want to, I mean, community.
You're getting to, I think, a really important part of a conversation that needs to be had more in the mainstream, which is just the nonprofit industrial complex, and what research is funded, what programs are funded because of that. Research is not funded because they don't want certain things to be occurring, and how that puts pressure on especially large orgs and definitely small orgs to be able to to have to compromise on a lot of things. And so I think it's an interesting, that's definitely like a topic to have like a whole other discussion about in that respect. Definitely got to go down that rabbit hole. But one thing that I do got to say that really left an impression on me back when I was at Brown. And, you know, I feel like, you know, I'm blessed in my life, because as soon as we started the Great One-Eighters, it was kind of like I was thrown in an incubator of sorts at Brown, where I was able to soak up all this knowledge and touch base with all these thought leaders and action leaders, not only within Brown's campus, but throughout Rhode Island, and people that were passerbys. One of those individuals that had a great influence on me and really proved to me that I deserved to be in that space was the great Professor Trisha Rose. If you don't know about her, definitely check her out. Amazing hip hop scholar. She wouldn't even consider herself a really hip hop scholar. She's mentioned that before. She does a lot of things around critical race theory, black politic, just the whole shebang. But I got to speak a lot to her about hip hop culture and organizing, and took one of her hip hop classes as well. One of the things that really stood out to me was the fact that she said that one of the more radical things that we can do as the hip hop generation is to use free play and unchecked public displays that produce dialogues, and give the opportunity for folks to affirm one another and their being interpersonally and intrapersonally in that sense as well. So within oneself and outside of oneself, while also giving an opportunity to have a larger critique about social inequality. So in some ways it's mixing, you know, she was saying, you know, we need to use this tool to bring people together, to heal, to organize, and to be able to reimagine. You know, those are the things that we really need to consider. And for myself, I really think healing is an integral part of what we do. You know, we can't run before we can walk in that sense, right? And so some of the work that's really important in our role as administrators within hip hop orgs and within arts orgs and just nonprofits in general is, what are we doing to put ourselves out of business, basically, you know? And how are we actively working to do that? Because the reality is we're operating as nonprofits because something's messed up. And if we're not actively doing something to fix that, then we're not really doing much at all. And that's the thing that I constantly want to push, because the end game is not to have nonprofits be providing these services. It's for people to be able to have the resources and assets equitably distributed to where we're able to do these things without needing an intermediary. You know, and I think that's the dream. And these spaces that we're creating that get people to vibe, but at the same time exchange ideas and grow with one another. I think that's what needs to be done, and I think this is the revolution or again, I don't want to call it revolution, the evolution that's happening, because revolutions go in circles and we're going up.
Facts, big facts. Yeah, revolution versus evolution. I love that. That's language is so important these days, and I think that's a big distinction we all can make for each other. I love that, because it's true, revolutions go in circles, but evolution is a trajectory, right? I love that. And also, yeah, man, this concept of nonprofits existing to put themselves out of business. I just want to touch on that a little bit, just to make sure no one's confused by that, because it's such an important and valuable concept for all of us doing social justice work and community work. The idea, right, and let me know if I'm explaining this right, but the idea is that we are working to solve these issues and reimagine these issues and create new systems so that we don't have to exist to solve and reimagine and fix these issues in the first place. Do I have that right?
Exactly. And I think the goal of an arts organization in some ways, or the end game, right, the strategic plan, arts organizations, the good ones are artist run, right? So right. I think that the interpersonal driver for the people working in that organization should be, I don't want to have to do my art to have to solve problems. I want to just be able to do my art in that respect, for the reasons of just creating. But because my heart and my soul and my mind tell me that something's wrong in the world and that I have this special ability and tool that I need to share and build with, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that until one day I don't have to do that and I can just, be in that respect. And again, that's where Rose really brings and drives it home, this idea of free play, because as administrators, we get caught up a lot in those metrics and within the box that is created for us. And with free play, we're able to unplug from that and just, in that way, freestyle, right? As dancers, as street dancers, that's something that we do often. And I feel as an administrator yourself, I know that you speak to your own experience, but for myself, when I freestyle, it's like all of the structure, bureaucracy, the things that take up too much of my brain waves disappear.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. And I know, and we touched on this last time a bit, but just this idea of, being a hip hop practitioner and bringing those hip hop values into the administrative space, and it's what you alluded to earlier, leading as a community, everybody being a power player and a decision maker, not necessarily, of course, there's value in having, somebody, in the ED role to make the final call, right, when it's needed, but really operating as a community, as a cipher, and in that, I think, participatory culture of hip hop, where there are no spectators in a cipher, everybody's jumping in, everybody's a stakeholder, that's the format, we all aspire to and we all, operate in as these hip hop, organizations. So yeah, man, thank you for that. Thank you.
Awesome.
But yeah. Huh?
That was a powerful 25 minutes.
Just kicking it off. Damn, I love it. All right. But yeah, and so I would love to shift a little bit to talking kind of about, where we're at now, and in this time we're in, we are in an uprising. We are in, there's so many names for it and terms for it. And I'm curious what you're calling this movement, for yourself on your end. But, we're in a modern day civil rights movement. We're in a time, a whirlwind time where, we're finally looking at so many of these systems as a mainstream culture in a way that I don't think we have before, and it's such a powerful moment of politics, of activism, of community building. And so, I'm curious, what the Great One-Eighters are doing with that these days. Where are y'all standing? How are y'all feeling in that? I know there's moments of like incredible work and beauty and amazingness and unity. And there's moments of struggle and, like you said, hard conversations and divisiveness. And like, there's so much going on right now. So I'd love to hear, you speak a little bit on, where the Great One-Eighters are with all this right now? What are y'all, what conversations are y'all having? What circles are y'all moving in? And yeah, of course, what tools do you think hip hop brings to the stage for this moment? Because I think hip hop is just built for this in so many ways. So I'd love, dive in. Where y'all at? What y'all thinking and feeling at this time?
So, like to get that going, I kind of just want to track back on why this relates to hip hop culture, how this connected to hip hop culture in that sense, and why we're rooted in that as practitioners of hip hop culture, and how we should see that as the same movement in that sense. So when we look back at the roots of hip hop, and just some of the stories that we are shared and that we learn as practitioners in here, one of them namely, the development and creation of Zulu Nation, and where that came from. And so, you hear the name Afrika Bambaataa, one of the godfathers of hip hop culture in that respect. He was able to put together Zulu Nation as an offshoot of Black Spades. Black Spades being a gang at the time in the neighborhood. But the reason why he was really pushing hard to create this other sect called Zulu Nation within Black Spades was because at the time he was being, very much informed by the Black Panther movement. And at the time, the Black Panther movement was out there providing community response to crisis. When it came down to providing food to those that are in need, whether it came to do street justice or dispute resolution, those were the things that they were there because the cops wouldn't come to the neighborhood in that respect. And better yet, who more equipped than people who live there? And so when Afrika Bambaataa, was kicking it around, the hood and kicking it with the Black Spades and vibing and chopping it up, but then going to the Black Panther side and getting knowledged up, organizing, seeing the value of that, I think something clicked in his mind, especially as the elements of hip hop started to brew that. And that's what really brought, this idea of Zulu Nation, this idea of what a hip hop crew in its entirety with all elements involved can be. So it's very much rooted in social justice. It's very much rooted in what nowadays we call community-based interventions, and looking at how hip hop crews and hip hop organizing bodies very much provide those types of interventions within other communities. And I mean, it's not something that you have to go so far into research to find. I mean, you got two organizations like in LA that are doing the work right here, right now, Versatile and Great One-Eighters, And so when we think about the work, whether it's personal or whether we explicitly do it for social justice, I think it's important to understand where this culture is rooted. And it's rooted in social justice, it's rooted in racial justice, and it's rooted in economic justice, very much rooted in economic justice in the class struggle. So we have to acknowledge that. And that's why I think it's an important time right now for us to have these conversations, because if it wasn't for the collective class struggle that was taking place at the time with African American folks, Boricuas, folks from Taino heritage, with all Asian folks, white folks, everyone that was a brewing there, they were all suffering from economic violence and the class-based system. There was poverty all around. And even those that came from middle-class families started to feel that burden. And that's why, a lot of the times you had some of the graffiti artists back in the day, they were mostly white because they had the access to it, but yet they were still sold this false dream that really wasn't something that they as young people were vibing with. And so hip-hop culture, to me, as much of it as it is rooted in racial justice, it's rooted in economic justice and the class struggle, because that's the reason why we have DJs. That's the reason why we started dancing on linoleum. We was broke. People didn't dance on linoleum because it looked cool. Like, they danced on it because it was the 60s and 70s going into the 80s. Linoleum was starting to get thrown out from kitchens and from houses because people were upgrading to like wood floors and more modern, quote unquote, things. And so people who didn't have the means would go into dumpsters, grab the linoleum, run it with their little homies when they were like 8 years old to the hood, and then just get down on the block. Like that's DJing very much came from being able to patch together different things from and at different things from let's say the junkyard, the pawn shop, you know, and a big reason why there was even that type of ingenuity was because at the time there wasn't really many extracurricular opportunities that were offered to youth. Black and brown youth and other vulnerable populations were pretty much relegated to, you either participated in a job development program of sorts, of which electrician and electricity, like knowledge about electricity, was put out. So a lot of this stuff is what a lot of the Black and brown youth at the time had in their minds already from going through these trade programs that were being pushed at the time for Black and brown youth. It wasn't like they were creating these like dope arts-based programs. It was like, no, you're Black, you're brown, you're young, you're vulnerable, you're going to be looked at as a consumer good. You're going to be able to produce in a couple of years some tax money and revenue for us. That's what they were thinking about. And so the resilience of BIPOC individuals, of Black, Indigenous people of color, really where it comes out at is they took that knowledge that they were being handed down by this colonialized kind of system, and they flipped it. And then they grabbed the things that people would consider trash. They put those things together, and bam, now we have turntablism. Bam, now we have a sound system where we can break on the linoleum that we found. So again, when we think about again, like just taking it to all the elements and showing some love.
Right, please. Thank you.
Graph artists, what ended up happening, they would rack paint. What is racking paint? Racking paint was literally like stealing paint. Spray paint, going into certain shops, a lot of it was done to the major shops, but unfortunately some smaller shops, did get hit back in the days too. But a lot of that came because folks couldn't afford certain paints. And then there was even this own ingenuity, which is why now we have so much variety of paints, because people started mixing different inks, different things. Now that's why we have, the Montanas, the Iron Lacs, we have, the pens, we have all these different caps, and so it's the ingenuity of people who did not have the resources who made things happen. The MC and rap is very much in the same boat, especially with recordings and things of that nature, so we could go on in just that, but I just want to kind of root the conversation in the fact that hip hop comes from that, and everything that we do stems from this development that's taking place. And when you ask, what are the Great One-Eighters doing, what is Awoke doing, what are we doing with the Unite Cultural Center that we just opened, and I obviously can think of all the plugs, right? Like, oh, there's a program, and I definitely say check it out. Check out our Instagram. You can find all that stuff. We have our events up there. But what I really want to say is what our methodology is rooted in. And where it's rooted in is in the belief that hip hop culture and the different elements of hip hop are connected to very much this theory in education and human development that we call the theory of multiple intelligences, which is Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And so we started to once we started to doing the deeper dive into our education system, into hip hop culture, into critical race theory, this is something that stood out to me personally because it showed me how the elements of hip hop culture, the tools of hip hop culture very much relate to human development and the creation of a whole human being that has the ability to navigate the world, and just a quick shout out to the intelligences, of which we all have them at varying levels. That's why we say everyone is intelligent in their own right. There's verbal and linguistic.
Before we jump in, Pierre, I just have to pause because you are dropping so much knowledge. And before we get into this list, before we jump away from that incredible hip hop history lesson that you just gave to people for free 99, dropped knowledge on y'all for free about hip hop history, Zulu Nation history, Element history, New York history, economic history. I just wanted to take a moment and just give you a breather in a sense too, that just, wow, Thank you for that. Folks, listen, I hope you're taking notes. I hope you have a notepad or your phone and something, and you just took notes on where Africa Bambaataa came from, the Black Spades, the economic history of New York, everything that was happening with graffiti art and how it was, you know, affecting all communities in the Bronx. There was so much history in everything that Pierre just dropped for y'all. And it's so important to ground ourselves in all the varied histories of hip hop culture, because there's so many different histories depending on where you were and what time it was. But just wanted to take a moment to just thank you for that. Wow, brother. Thank you for just dropping knowledge on all of us, and myself included. There was so much in that I didn't know about graph history and DJing and presencing the fact of how hip hop really was able to take something, the throwaways, right? The things folks didn't want anymore, and flip it into something beautiful and incredible. So just had to just take a moment for that. Thank you for all that hip hop history. And yes, Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences is incredible. Look it up. Howard Gardner, HOWARDGARDNER. I learned about this a while back and it changed my life too. And I love that you're going to connect it to hip hop for us, because that is freaking genius. So yes, want to take a moment. Thank you. Go. List of multiple intelligences. Hit it.
Word. Yeah, no, I'll list them, and then, you know, if we want to go on deeper dive into that, that's cool. If we want to move on from there, that's great too, you know. Right. But I just want to say that the theory of multiple intelligences, there's 9 distinctive forms, although, you know, nowadays people have added and taken some, consolidated some. But in that raw form, we're talking about verbal and linguistic, which is very much, you know, using the gift of the gab. Logical and mathematical, which is another one. Visual and spatial, bodily and kinesthetic, naturalistic intelligence, musical intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, and intrapersonal intelligence, and the existentialist intelligence. And so when we look at all these intelligences, we have them all, again, as I mentioned, at varying levels. And the ways in which we learn best is reflected by where those intelligences that we have are higher. And so something that's beautiful about hip hop culture is that there's various artistic and creative, productive tools within hip hop culture that fit these intelligences. And so you'll find folks that, you know, were very much really, really, really dope B-boys. And then you like go ahead and find out, you visit their crib and they got some dope graph pieces. You're like, yo, where'd you get those from? Oh, I did them. It's like, what? You know, because a lot of people think, wait, you know, like dancing is very much bodily, but, you know, this idea of graffiti is an art. It's very much this logical and mathematical thing that you're doing, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, the geometry behind it. It's the visual and the spatial intelligences. And so the beauty of it is through hip hop culture, as you introduce something, as you show people this kind of like multi-dimensional platter of sorts. The way I think about it as a kid, right? So I show you this platter and I let you pick whatever toy you want to play with. And I know that, you know, at all times, you still have all those toys left there. So if you don't like the can anymore, you can go pick up the Adidas shoe and start breaking. You know, if you don't like that, then go pick up the mic and start writing on your notepad. So there's so many different ways here. And, you know, I think in this westernized perspective, of living and in youth development in general, we've always seen it as one way, right? I don't know if you grew up being told this, but I was always told, like, stop trying to do so much. Just focus on one thing. You're not going to get good at anything if you don't just focus on one thing. Stop trying to listen to all this music. Just focus on your schoolwork, or stop doing this and just do that, you know? So I think hip hop provides a different way and a reimagining. And I very much believe that a lot of what we're seeing today, that we're, you know, in this society working to help enhance people's living through, you know, what we call, you know, developmental disabilities, you know, different forms of autism. I very much think and believe, because of my own perspective and my own experience, that when we introduce youth who we label as developmentally disabled to the elements of hip hop culture and the different platter of sorts, we see that there really is not this idea of a disability. It's a different ability. Exactly. Youth and people were evolving just as quick as our society is evolving, we're evolving socially too. Don't forget, we're social beings. So just because I'm not growing another limb doesn't mean I'm not growing in here and through my consciousness. And so, I think it's important that we look at how hip hop can provide entrances and avenues into all these different intelligences. And I'll tell you right now, this cipher that we're having, right? Hip hop cipher, right? This circle that we're creating through the interwebs in that sense. This is very much practicing that interpersonal, and existentialist belief, that intelligence within us too. So I just want to give, drop that to folks, start thinking through that. Well, along these lines, there was also teaching different teaching modalities that fit into these intelligences. So if you're interested in like educating folks, doing hip hop arts or anything like that, I would definitely suggest that. Or even if you're just interested in human development, because for me, learning this really helped me become a better leader, because again, westernized perspective in the nonprofit world, if you don't have, let's say, the verbal and linguistic intelligence and the logical and mathematical, then what are you doing in administration? Like you're part of the talent, go over there. And that's not the truth. That's very much not the truth. And so learning this as a leader too, as an organizing leader, helps you really understand where other people can shine as leaders, and that there's not just like this one intelligence that we have to seek out for in that respect.
And that's what was so incredible about this theory to me when I started reading it. And this was in college at some point when I stumbled upon this theory as well of multiple intelligences, was that I remember, I really reflected on my schooling, and I remember feeling like there were certain intelligences that were so overly valued by our system and the way we've been taught and the way we learn, right? Like learning through the written word and learning through textbooks, and that we had to take math and we had to take English, and like, this was like, it was so narrow in this way, what we were being told as this marker of what is intelligence. You're intelligent because you can do this, and you're not intelligent because you can't do that same thing. And that was such bullshit to me. Like, excuse my language, youth on the, but it was BS. Like, because there's the range of intelligences that this opens us up to. It's so much more varied and diverse. When you start getting into the interpersonal intelligence, spatial intelligence, existential, there are some deep people I have met who you put a math problem in front of them and they're like, a bunch of numbers, what the heck am I doing? But they for days talking about existentialism and spirituality and the depth of the human heart, right? And that so much of the problem was what was being valued one over the other. And that was like revolutionary to me to think about, because it's things we know. We know these things in our heart. We're human beings, but yet we get socialized and trained to think in this Western colonized way of thinking. So yeah, Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, look it up. It's incredible.
Yep. You don't judge a fish on their ability to fly, unless they're a flying fish, that is. For sure. That's multiple intelligences for you right there.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, sure. So yeah, tell us more, what, with our last little kind of 15 minutes here, what are the Great One-Eighters up to these days? What are y'all doing in this time? And how are y'all, working with, the current climate of the world that we're in? How are y'all healing? How are y'all building community for yourselves personally? How are you doing? How are you doing in all of this? Because, I think we forget to do that sometimes, just check in with each other. But, and what are the Great One-Eighters up to? How are y'all feeling in this time?
Yes. So I appreciate you asking. Even just on a personal level, I feel like I've grown to be a little bit more even keeled about the situation that's happening. It was definitely impacting me in a lot of ways, kind of bringing up a lot of different feelings that I've had. Been able to reflect a lot more in my life, which has been great, and I think this time has given me that opportunity and privilege because of my ability to still hold a job within, the county and serve as is in my role and in my capacity. Beyond just the work that I'm doing within the Great One-Eighters, I'm also a consultant, a senior human relations consultant with the county government, working on police reform, the Police and Human Relations Project. So being in the middle of the weeds of that has also been quite stressful in that respect, trying to really bring folks to a table to have hard discussions and trying to mediate and arbitrate, in that sense. And so it's been an interesting but beautiful struggle in that respect. And I think I wouldn't have it any other way. And it's proved to me even more so the importance of the Great One-Eighters and the importance of the work that we're doing out in the community. And just to drop some plugs here, we've been transitioning into more of a virtual realm, just like VersaStyle has in that respect. I definitely want to invite folks to tune into a family affair, our community arts festival. It's going to be our 10-year anniversary, y'all. 10 years deep. 10 years deep, all right? We started this with kids.
I got my 10-year deep shirt too. I'm going to go grab it.
Yeah. So definitely tune in. It's going to be great. We're going to be having a little montage of everything that we're about with the Great One-Eighters. All the elements of hip hop will be represented. We will be having critical conversations with our members and with community folk. We will be providing you all with different content and opportunities to learn. We're also looking at transitioning a lot more of our programs online through different online services. So look out for that. Beyond just the free programming that we're putting out for the community, we're planning on bringing our club programs back in a virtual way. And we're trying to make sure we're working on it slow and steady, because we want to make sure that it's meaningful and not just in some ways superficial, just moving around in that respect. And so we're really trying to curate that experience where we can be more holistic in our approach. So look out for that. Beyond that, I definitely want to give a shout out to the organization and our members as well for holding it down as part of the Invest in Youth Coalition. Two of our members, myself included, and Leanne Chapman, one of our youth leaders, she and I are members of the City of Los Angeles Youth Development Task Force. We're tasked with creating a blueprint for the City of Los Angeles' first ever youth development department. So look out for that. And if you're interested in being involved in those critical conversations about race, about equity, about what we're doing to change the game and invest in our youth so that we're not investing in incarcerating them and throwing them out on the streets as adults, be a part of this conversation. This is something that's important. You can go on to ydtf.lacity.org to check out the meeting schedule, agendas, ways that you can provide public comment. I definitely suggest this is a very important time. If you are making it out to the protest or not, doesn't matter as much as being part of these conversations of reimagining the future. This is what's important. Beyond that, we're also now working with some of our partners from across the Valley, as well as Youth Justice Coalition, to put together the Community Alternatives to 911 crisis response community response team in the San Fernando Valley. It's in initiating form right now. So if you're interested in that too, holler at us. We'll definitely put you on game. And this is for people who from trauma-informed practitioners to medical staff to hip-hop artists to healers to you call it, you name it. It's everyone coming together, just like what we were talking about with the Zulu Nation, creating community-based interventions and making sure that nobody in our community gets left behind. Beyond that, we're also pushing census stuff because it's so important right now, even more than ever, to complete your census. So I know it sounds kind of square of me, but this is one of the most important things that you can also do with your time right now, because in a moment where we're talking about equity, we have to show the feds and everybody else, because the census goes more than just the federal government. It really runs the way that the United States looks at data and distribution of wealth and resources for the next 10 years. It's really important right now to make sure that all youth are counted, that all folks are counted, that all vulnerable communities are counted. So please make sure that not only do you complete your census, but that your friends and your family do too, because that's how we'll make sure to get these critical resources out into the communities. And not just that, but also make sure that we have more of this people power that we're pushing hard on. Beyond that, I'm just thinking about the healing aspect. We're really looking at how within the Great One-Eighters we can use the tools that we have, the platforms that we've built to really push this idea of healing within our communities. While we're also doing organizing work, we recognize that organizing spaces are not always the best spaces for healing work to happen, because a lot of folks come into organizing work with already a set mind, with certain judgment around certain feelings and emotions. And I think what's happening now, not only within our community, but I think speaking more specifically to our dance community, is that we're having a sense of divisiveness because some folks are really not creating healing spaces and wanting to take every single public space and create it in some ways into an organizing space, of which folks have all the right to do, to create organizing spaces. But we must also recognize the trajectory of people and the fact that if we want somebody to take off running, we have to show them, and there has to be a sense of patience, delivery, empathy. And unfortunately, that is some of the emotional work that we're talking about, that we also have to put forth while other folks have to reciprocate. And so, I really feel like for the Great One-Eighters, we're trying to really see how we can plug into creating and being part of those spaces. We've been doing work with the young warriors in Tia Chucha Centro Cultural around anti-Blackness throughout our own communities, within our Latino community, within how it impacts Indigenous communities, how it intersects with the arts and things in society. So this is the work that needs to be done. These are the critical conversations that need to be had, and these are the actions that need to be taken. And the best thing that we can do is, while everything's interconnected, interrelated, and universal in that respect, everything feeds into those three things feed into each other. We also have to consider to give ourselves the spaces for all three, because if we just mesh them all together, we're sure to burn ourselves out. And that's just speaking from my own experience in that sense too.
Damn. Yeah, I want to give you like a standing O right now. And I think we might be on a little bit of a delay, so apologies if I'm coming in later or whatnot. But
what you thinking, full out?
Yeah. Oh my God. So so much. Wow, you dropped so much. Wow. So, okay. So first and foremost, a couple of shout outs I want to highlight and amplify. One is the Invest in Youth Coalition, the IIYC.
Appreciate it, man.
The IIYC is incredible. They're an incredible organization for organizing and just for Indigenous youth. They're just a great resource to be a part of. Youth Justice Coalition is amazing as well. They do so much work around incarceration and in particular youth. Tia Chuchas is an amazing organization for books and reading and literature and organization and healing and Indigenous healing. Like Tia Chuchas is just amazing. So much amazing stuff going on there. And also thank you for doing the work around, police reform, and my God, we could do a whole hour just on that. And I would love to know what you're doing and how that's going and what we're really looking at in this way and what's productive and not. And that's incredible. And then also, of course, yeah. So this topic of like divisiveness and particularly looking at our dance community right now, which I think in so many ways, hip hop and dance is so healing and so incredible. And we're such just an incredible example of unity, in so many ways. And in so many ways, I feel our community is really hurting right now too. We're having our own struggles, along Black and brown lines, and particularly in these public spaces and in social media, and folks really feeling like, social media is the space to just put out information and feelings and trauma. And in so many ways it's productive, and in so many ways it's divisive, right? And I think that's probably what you're speaking to. And I appreciate you bringing that up. And I think the thing I want to leave us with in that regard is just something you said about the intersection between organizing and healing spaces. And to just be really conscious of how we inhabit both of those spaces, how we inhabit them, when we inhabit them, why we inhabit them, and to really bring attention to the healing that we need, in when we're organizing, when we're not organizing. And I really appreciate you bringing that to all of our attention. And how can we, organize our communities, because that's important. And how can we do the call-ins and, you know, the hard conversations, and also how do we heal, you know, and how do we bring each other together, and how do we do that through this thing that we love so much, you know, hip hop.
Yeah.
It's possible to do both, you know, and
yeah. I feel you 100% on this, and you know, I think it's an interesting time that we're living in, where, you know, we're actively trying to address, you know, a lot of things that are going on in our community, and then the nihilism that really has existed in our community, that's made not only our youth in some cases, but people in general, like, have to live lives that where they feel meaningless or hopeless or loveless, and these are the issues really at heart of things. You know, I think one thing that I heard that really stuck with me was I was just tuning into someone's conversation. They were talking about toxic positivity, and that really struck me heavy. You know, we talk about toxic masculinity a lot, you know, and how it inhabits spaces. But I've also heard a lot about this, like, toxic positivity culture of, like, peace, love, and unity, and just throwing that out there to deflect things. And again, I think that, yes, this does exist in certain spaces, and is used as it's weaponized by certain folks who don't want to have the conversations. But I also think, you know, and there is spaces where we definitely have to have that in mind, be intentional about putting out that positive vibe and energy. There's a time and a space to have those conversations. There's a time and a space to heal, and there should be an equal footing in both. I mean, we shouldn't just look at it, I think, in some ways as like a one-way street right now. One of the things that really sticks with me is, you know, you loving yourself and loving your próximo, your neighbor, in that sense, is a radical act in and of itself.
right.
You being a happy individual in this circumstances, the circumstances that we're presented as BIPOC folks, Black, Indigenous people of color, y'all, like, expressing your positivity, expressing your love, expressing your joy is a very powerful tool and weapon. And that's the fuel that not only fuels you, but it will fuel somebody else too in the lucha. So again, we gotta make sure that we have that balance, and that we're not demonizing the very people that we could be making our comrades. And I think that this is where we're at right now. The world is on fire, and certain folks are not thinking about how do we build camaraderie, how do we build that solidarity, how do we build people to get there, because we can't expect everyone to be there all at once. And so some folks will have to be doing the work to ease that in and bring that in. And I'm not talking about incrementalism here. I'm talking about meeting people where they're at, you know, because the whole problem with the idea of revolution, for in my mind,
Right.
is that what ends up happening is, in liberating ourselves, we subjugate somebody else. And that's the revolution. You're now becoming who you're fighting against by subjugating people who might not have your way, your perspective, your lived experience, and your feeling for certain things because of that. And not you, you know, I'm not saying not you, but, like, you know, individuals that are divisive. And I have so much love and respect still for those folks, because I see them hurting, I see them trying, I see them running, I see myself in them.
Right.
I see myself stumbling and falling and not believing that I was, you know, that I was an imposter in the space, not believing in my ability. I see that in a lot of this divisiveness. And really it's because we're not giving ourselves the times to reflect and heal in our own wounds, so that we can then help somebody else. I think one of the deepest things that I heard recently, as I've been digging deep into indigenous circles, and indigenous healing circles, was the idea of the wounded healer. You know, there's people out there, while well intentioned, while promoting positivity and their positive evolution in our world, they themselves are still hurting. And you, as a wounded healer, can do a lot of damage to people.
Right.
And that's the thing that people don't consider when they're in the lucha too, to give themselves the moment to consider, what are my wounds, and what wounds that I have I'm passing on. Like, am I, like, it's not like, obviously in my mind, I have a crazy imagination, but the way I look at it is, if my wound is here, then here, come in me trying to help you out, let me give you the same type of slit. so that you feel that same type of anger that I feel inside. And now, as wounded healers, we're passing on our wounds. We're empowering folks, but we're passing on our wounds. And that's not an actively good way of ensuring that we're being holistic and that we're making sure that we're thinking about harm reduction strategies.
Right.
Like, how can I make sure that I leave you in a better place than when I met you? You know, and not judge it based just solely on what I think is good, but what you think is good for you, because that's what's important. What you think is good for you is important to me, because what I think is important for me should be important to you. I am you and you are me in that sense. That's my recent post, in la quech alakin. That right there is as a Mayan saying that tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other me, you know, and that sense of reflection is something that's really important in this time, because part of racism, and you know, I know this is going to be probably a deeper dive into something else, but part of the racist structures that be, and the mechanism of racism and race, is to keep us compounded in this circle, because we're not looking at this other oppression that is really holding us down. And what was tripping me out was when I came out of the shower this morning, I had like a vivid image in my mind of like a political cartoon, right? And so in my mind, think of a classroom, right? And then think of different desks. And at each desk, you have an ism. You have sexism, heterosexism, you have racism. And the teacher in the front of the class is classism. And class is in session. Because classism is what's teaching all these other isms. And what the issue being that we're here stuck fighting the little warriors and comrades of classism. And we're going to keep going in this loop, this roundabout, when classism is still here chilling, teaching more isms, finding other ways of helping evolve oppression. And that's where I come at this from. You know, and my heart is beating hella fast right now, just thinking and saying that, because it's an excitement that we're in a war where we got to fight these things. We got to talk about these things, you know, and we got to bring people into liberation together in partnership, not by force.
Just gonna let that sit for a minute. Thank you for that, man. Yeah, so much wisdom there and knowledge. Wow. I definitely think we need to find someone, unless, I don't know if you got the artistic hand, but we got to find somebody to draw that cartoon.
Hey, man. Pan pending.
Exactly.
Yo, bro, I got ideas like that for days. You know, being in this work, I've thought of like, how can we teach human relations to people in a way that is palatable, in the way that's culturally appropriate and responsive in that way. Right. So I have a couple ideas in my mind of how to be able to use the elements of hip hop to bring that together. I think at this point, you know, to bring it back full circle, as an arts administrator, I'm trying to open up that circle of trust within the Great One-Eighters and Awoke and Unite to be able to then delegate more, so that I can live a life more freely in my creative self, because I know I have a lot to give to the world still in that respect, and I'm excited to be able to do that. So I know I need to be intentional about that. And you know, one individual that really stands out in my mind is Fabiana. She's an artist that also runs Culture Strike. You know, that's just a amazing person, amazing arts administrator, and somebody who really holds it down still in their artistic self and representation of self. So that's kind of who I aspire to be in my art and admin role.
Yeah, big love to you for cultivating your artistic journey and your artistic talents and passion. It's so important and so needed for those of us in these administrative positions, for everybody, but especially for those of us in these administrative positions, when we do end up just giving, typing, writing emails, you know, organizing. To really invest in that artistic part of ourselves is 100% important. I'm about to go to the park right now and do just that, and dance and cultivate that, you know.
Yeah, hip hop for social change, baby. Check it out. B-Boy Summit, right? Taking place at 5 p.m. if I'm not mistaken, Grand Park, right in front of the City Hall. Don't miss out. Hip hop in action, baby.
Yeah, wear your masks, be safe, but yeah, no, definitely, yeah, go support the B-Boy Summit, fam. And also, yeah, just want to leave us as we end this out on our hour. 3 words, that are really resonating with me these days are love fights back. And that's coming from my homie B-Boy House out in Arizona, Furious Styles crew. Shout out to them. They've got a whole campaign, a graph campaign around the city. I believe they're in Phoenix, around the city of Phoenix right now. They're doing all these graph murals, and with those 3 words, love fights back. We're going to keep loving. We're going to keep fighting back. Pierre, thank you so much for this conversation today. So much knowledge. I feel like you and I are going to start a podcast someday, and we're just going to keep diving into all these conversations because everyone just seems to like do a new tangent that we just can go on.
Got to grab them all, man, for sure.
So thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for your energy. I think this is a great place to leave it off on our hour mark. I do want to say, please, what's the date for Family Affair? I don't know if I missed it, but what's our date this year? Do you have one yet?
Yeah, so it's actually going to be a celebration that's going to take throughout the week. Right. So we're going to be starting things up on the week of 8/18. So that's not hard to remember. Great 1-8ers, 8/18, San Fernando Valley. So on the week of the 8/18, we'll be promoting it before that, but make sure you tune in. It'll be on IG, it'll be on YouTube, it'll be on Facebook, on all the social media channels, and it's going to be great. It's really going to be about showing how rooted in community that we are. If y'all have tuned in to Flavor of the Month online, it's definitely going to be that and much more. It's really going to show, the well-roundedness of how all the elements interact with one another. So please do tune in. This is history in the making, us being in this space, us sharing these thoughts, these feelings, these actions, these vibes. So I want to just say thank you so much to our VS fam. We love you all, and I love you all, and I respect 100% what you all are doing out there in the community, and I appreciate the fact that you all lead with your authentic selves.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, P-Boogie. Appreciate you and all the Great 1-8ers fam for the partnership and the years of work. Thank you for all the Flavor of the Months online. I know Breeze and Precise, and we've all, been in it in some shape or form in the garage, tuning in early ass in the morning. We've had a blast doing it. Love you, brother. And yeah, any just last quick words for everybody as we head out?
Give yourself a moment to reflect. Give yourself that time to build with yourself and sharpen the saw. Because if you don't, then it's going to get dull and you're not going to be able to use that to cut, So make sure to give yourself that time. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Pierre. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to Versatile Conversations, episode 6, part 2 with Pierre P-Boogie. Great 1-8ers, we love y'all. Versatile LA fam, we love y'all. Community, we love y'all. There it is. Check them out. They're an incredible organization. And people, we'll see you next time. Peace and love, everybody.